So last week we were in the Kavango-Caprivi region, and how remote did it feel up there? We're now going to go to the Kaokoland Kunene region, which is the most remote area of Namibia, and possibly one of the most remote and difficult areas to travel to in Namibia. We did Damaraland, and see, Damaraland is fairly rough, but you can get to a lot of the big sites in a normal car until you get to Palmvag. North of Palmvag, the area then turns into what used to be called Kaokoland, was the old name of the Kokaveld, named because it was called Doubtful Fountain, is what the translation is, because there was a farmer who used to herd goats and things up there with a water source that he could never understand why there was water there. And he was doubtful that he would be able to live there for a long time, so it got the name Doubtful Water. But that water is actually from the Kunene River, which comes from Angola and flows underground. And that's why he couldn't understand why it never rained, but there was always water. So that was its old name, shall we say. It's now been renamed the Kunene region because of the river, the Kunene River, that flows down underneath a lot of the Kokaveld and out to sea. So people who know it will always call it Kaokoland, but the new name is Kunene. So we are just focusing literally on this top area here. So here's Chorikas, where we have Chorikas Rest Camp, and this is Damaraland. Then you have Palmvag here, and we're just focusing on this section here. So Etosha is over to one side, and Angola is across the top, Skeleton Coast down here. Now, there's two reasons to really visit this area. One is to go and see the Himba people, which we'll see some pictures of later. They're the local tribes people who live in this area. And the second one is just the vast openness and amazing landscapes of the area. Now, in terms of roads to this area, here's Angola at the top. Etosha is just over here. We're actually quite a bit further north. So the Galton Gate to Etosha and Damaraland is down here. But you can come out of the Galton Gate and take this road up here. This road here that goes into Apuvu and then up to Ruacana, this is a tar road. So you can take a normal car from Etosha or Damaraland, as long as you take this route only, into Apuvu to go and see the Himbas living there. And you can then take it up to Ruacana by the tar road, where you've then got the option to come down after you've seen Ruacana Falls, or to drive across the top north side of Etosha, which takes you into Avambo land on Balantu or Shakati, which you can then connects up to Rundu along there. And you can then do a tar road in a normal car all the way through to Victoria Falls if you want, or swing back round Etosha. In terms of tar roads and travelling in a normal car, they are the only sections of this entire area you can do without having a 4x4. So this road up here from Sesfontein through here, this is the only other road in the whole area. And literally from north of Sesfontein onwards, you will need a four-wheel drive to do that route. These two dotted lines that I've put on here is the journey we're going to do today. So when people come to this area, unless they just want to go to Apuvu to see the Himba people, this is the journey that people do, and we're going to follow this track today. Those two dotted lines are not roads. They are just tracks. There's no signposts. In the whole area, Apuvu has a petrol station and a store, an OK store, and that's it. That's the only supply point in the whole area. Ruacana has occasionally fuel, but generally you have to go to Oshakati, which is just over here. Once you start the journey here and you want to come round to south of Sesfontein and Palmvag, if you're doing this route, you have to carry everything yourself. Fuel, supplies, repair, medical, everything. Also, apart from a little area surrounding Apuvu and around Ruacana, there is no cell phone signal at all in this entire area. To give you an idea, we're like 378 kilometers from Sesfontein to Apupa and 450 to Crossways. So we're looking at an enormous area here. In that whole area, let's give you an idea. So from Joburg to here, that sort of area, is about the same distance as this, and then from here to Pietermaritzburg in Limpopo. That's the sort of area we're talking about. There's the one town in the area. There is 16,000 people in total live in that whole area. And they're mostly, 99% of them, are the Himba people who are nomadic hunter-gatherers, nomadic herders who live in this area. The main reason is well, you'll see, there's no water in the area apart from the rivers that are underground. So that's where we're off to today. In terms from places to stay, if you, yes, the other thing I should do is, the journey you can also only do this way round. So it's not a lot of journeys in Namibia. You can do trips clockwise, or if the accommodation is full, you can do it anti-clockwise. With this one, you can only go anti-clockwise. Any idea why? Van Zyls Pass is the thing, but there was also some other sectors. There's some areas along here which are so steep that you can only go down them, vehicles cannot drive up them. That's how bad the road conditions are in that area. So you can get from Sesfontein to Puros, but then you can't do this leg up here, that direction. See?
Is it tar road?
Sorry? Do you say tar or toll?
Tar.
Tar, no. You'll see why that is so funny in a minute when we actually see the road. It's such a bad road that they say even if you have an off-road 4x4 trailer, you shouldn't take it on this route. You'll see a few wrecks of trailers. More trailers get left there than go there. So I'll just let this roll in the background. This is an overview of the general area, some of the road conditions. This is the road you were talking about. And this is in the Marienfluss. And you can just see the vast emptiness of this area is just breathtaking. So the idea of going there, the other thing is, it's not recommended to go in one vehicle. Especially in the low season, when it gets rainy, because you get a lot of a lot of rivers coming up. There isn't even a huge amount of wildlife in this area. There is wildlife, like you've got the ostrich there, you'll see springbok. In certain parts near the rivers, you'll see the desert elephant, desert giraffe, desert lion, and desert rhino. And on the north, you've got the Kunene River, which then filters down underneath. This is generally giving a view of life in this area. This is the Himba people. That is how they dress normally. This is not for show. They don't get a lot of tourists in the area. To give you an idea, and that's them building their huts, using cow dung and mud to hold them together. This is how you get water in this area. So this is the guide basically filling the water for his guests. So there's a few water points, and because of the traditions of the area, you don't just go and help yourself to water at these fountains. You go and find the elder of the village, ask if it's okay, then you fill with water, and then you put it on. This is a very traditional area. And these are just all the kids. You can see how they do their hair from a young age. And they're absolutely fascinated with tourists. To give you some idea, this route that we're taking today, probably less than 100 people do every year. So we're not looking like anything like large numbers of tourism, which is why you have to be so self-sufficient as you go through. Another good reason, everybody will take 2 spare tyres in Namibia as general. Some people will take 2 spare tyres and a full repair kit for tyres in this area. If you go in the lower season, you might wait 3 months before another vehicle is going to come past. And you're in still its desert area, even though there is some water sources available, and there's no traffic going through these areas. There's not like supply trucks going anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere apart from Angola and Skeleton Coast, so there's nothing coming through. The people are incredibly friendly, and they're sort of getting used to tourists, but this is them just in general life. This is not dressed up, this is them living. Most of them are cattle herders, goats and cows. And again, this is the second water point, which you see you share with all the local life. And goat skins are quite a valuable commodity because they wear and trade in goat skins. Thankfully for them, not donkey skins.
So they share the water points with the
Yeah. And it literally, and saying wildlife and animals is actually quite crucial, because those water points, elephants will come in to drink at them, the ostrich will come in to drink at them, the goats will come into them, the cows will come into them, the people will come into them. So it really is, everything will come in, and everyone sort of just respects everyone's space. So it's...
Where do they get the water?
The water is pumped down from underneath, because the whole area, this area here, you'll see you'll see already from the pictures, it looks incredibly dry, because this is a problem that a lot of Namibia has, because it's not quite a desert, because it gets just enough rainfall for 2 months of the year, but the rest of the year there's no rain at all, so everything dries out really quickly. So on the surface it looks very desert-like, and it might as well be a desert for all intents and purposes, but like a lot of Namibia, there's a huge amount of water underneath there. So if you drill down, but you're drilling down like 30 to 50 to 100 meters before you find water. So beforehand, they used to dig wells by hand, and that's what they used children for. So I actually, because I worked up in this area with aid organizations for a while, because the way they used to dig water wells was they would get the smallest child that was strong enough, they would put a bucket on a rope around the kid's neck, and the bucket would hang in front of them. Then they'd tie a rope around the kid's feet. This is after they'd dug down about 20 meters and the adults couldn't get down. Then they would lower the child head first with their feet tied to a rope down in there with a bucket, and they would then dig the soil and put it in the bucket. Wiggle when they're ready, they'd pull it up until they hit water. Then they had to pull them up really quick, because then once they hit water, the water would start filling. And a lot of children got drowned, because the water would go up faster than they knew at the top if they weren't paying attention, and once it got deep, to pull the kids up. But that's how they dug water wells. It's absolutely, tragic and amazing, but that was just life there. The other thing is, 1 in 10 water holes produces drinking water. So for every 10 they drink, and sometimes they dig, sometimes they'll be digging for 2 or 3 months to dig a water well, then they'll hit water and it's undrinkable, because it's contaminated from the seaside, especially when you get onto the western side, which is the Skeleton Coast, because Skeleton Coast because basically this is still Skeleton Coast, this entire area, and this is a ridge of mountains that runs along the Kaokoland, or the Kunene region. And this actually is the highest geographical part of the country, which is really weird. This part of the country is actually higher than Bramberg Mountain, the top of Bramberg Mountain, because it's on a stepped plateau. So you're standing at but you actually, the top of Kaokoland, where you actually drive, Anzar's Pass, is higher than the top of Bramberg, which is Namibia's highest mountain. Bit of a conundrum, isn't it? But it's just the land from Bramberg grows up. Well, he waters it, so it grows up. No, it is built up on a plateau. Underneath it is the sand and limestone, though, which is why the water floods underneath it. But there's a granite plateau that the whole of the Kaokoland is on top. So which gives it that weird, there's a lot of water, but it's very difficult access. The other problem with being on a granite plateau is because they go nearer the coast, they can dig deeper because it's sand, but then the water's contaminated. They come inland, they dig down, they hit this granite plateau. And of course, by hand, or even with some tools, you can't dig through a granite plateau. So apparently my collar's gone. Thank you, darling.
Can you boil the water closer to the seaside?
You can, but that's not the problem. It's not that it's unhealthy, it's saline and soda mix. So it actually, you can drink it and you'll survive on it. It's a bit like the water, we're back to Fish River Canyon again. We can't escape Fish River Canyon, can we? It's the same process as the water in Fish River Canyon. You can drink it for a short while and you'll survive on it, but you can't drink it, humans can't drink it over a long period. It generally will then shut down your kidneys and liver, because your kidney and liver is absorbing all those things to put the water into your body, and it can't work hard and fast enough, which is what it makes amazing for the desert animals that do survive on it there, because they have adapted to survive, hence the desert adapted elephant and lion and rhino, which are unique to this part of the world. So yes, but they have adapted to selling, and it's amazing when you think some of these areas, they might, in high season, they might see 1 car a week. But they'll always be set out every day with their trinkets and things, and these are all handmade by the Himbas. When I was also there in the 90s, the only communication to that area was by telephone wire that ran, you remember all the overhead cables we used to have, and now getting rid of, thankfully. The Himbas found out they were made of copper. They make all their jewelry from copper. So they used to travel around the country, around their area, taking the telephone lines down to strip out the copper to make bracelets and earrings and a lot of things that they braid and put in their hair. Now obviously all those telephone lines have been put down, they put different cable in, and they then go back to sourcing it naturally. But there's even little deposits where they get all these locally mines, where they get it, break down, put different things together to make the metals. But also they recycle really well. So if a car crashes up there or breaks down, they will strip it and use everything. They'll use bits for building a house. They'll beat it to make jewelry. They will not waste anything. But yeah, it's a fascinating area, both from culturally and geographically. And you'll see, everywhere there's habitation, there's big Jojo tanks. But this is a typical village in this area. There's a Himba village, so you're all familiar with the kraal system, where generally you've got the kraal where you build, because then goat and cow herders, normally in the middle of the kraal will be a strong fence which they can put the cattle in at night, then the houses around it, and then a fence around the outside to protect. And all the so the primary things for Himbas that gets right in the middle, that gets guarded by everybody, is the cattle, because that's the commodity. Generally, wealth and your status is designated by how many cows you have. If you don't have cows, then it's on goats. And so it goes down. Then around the cows, they then put the men. Then on the outside, they put the women. Because, they're optional. Which shows where their priorities lie, but we're not going to touch that today. But this is a typical crime, and you'll see these just dotted around this area. This, by the way, we're on the road here. Buying firewood, you'll find these little things beside the road where you'll gather, but there'll just be piles of firewood that they've stripped from the local area. Often, as it gets more remote, there's nobody there. But there's usually something scrawled on the post as to how many Namibian dollars they expect. And then you just take the money or the coins and you wedge it in this gap here. And then somebody will come and collect it. Often though, if you're there for a few minutes, even though you're in the middle of nowhere, you'll find some little child running at high speed towards you. You'll see them in a little trail of dust. It's Frankie Fredericks on his way. And he'll be very angry. And then often you'll help, and then he'll say, "You need money." "Oh yeah, money. Oh yeah." It's like, they're so excited to interact. A typical campsite in this area. This is actually at an official campsite. This is actually by the river. So we're up at a pooper here. We'll come back to all these. This is just a little glance to give you an idea. Everything you want, you take with you. This one actually is quite nice at a pooper. It does have some things that most of the campsites have nothing. No electricity, no water, no fire pit, nothing whatsoever. There's literally a tree. You make your own space. You camp underneath it. There's no fences. Yes?
And in the village, do they have electricity? Or?
90% no. Apuvu has electricity. Puros has intermittent electricity, but most of them, like that kraal we saw, no. And most of them have no use for electricity. And if you saw that, that was the water heating for the showers at the campsite. Good old donkey. And elephants are a big attraction along here. All the animals run completely wild, and there's no fences in this entire area apart from where the people live in their kraal. So starting in Apuvu, which is the administrative town here, and is the only town in the whole area. I think I looked up because there's 16,000 people in the whole area. The official population of Apuvu is 2,000 people. And that's the capital of the area. So all resource, but there is quite a lot. There's a Tops Bottle Store, there's a Checkers, there's a couple of banks and fuel stations. So it's your last place in the whole, or the only place in the whole area to get any supplies. And it's got a tar street. So this is a Herero woman, and this is just going about her normal business. So this is how she will dress every day. With the big hat and the big flowery dresses. As you can see, there's Herero. She's just come from the OK supermarket. That's a Himba man. You see, got his stick. That's for defending against lions. And this is a typical supermarket queue. So you've got the Himba lady there. and then you've got all the people dressed in different ways, just in the supermarket. Yes?
But do they all get along?
Yeah.
Are they, okay.
Yeah. Certain more in these rural areas, because basically they're all from one tribe in this. They're all Himbas. So they're Himbas or Hereros. The Himbas are part of the Herero tribe. They're like a sub-tribe. You will rarely see, like through all of this area we'll go through, we won't see a single policeman or police car or police station. The Himbas still have an uneasy agreement with the Namibian government, because the Namibian government, especially in recent years, wants to show Namibia as a forward country that's developing and modern. This does not fit in with that picture. The Himbas, on the other hand, don't want anything to do with modern life. You know, internet, Wi-Fi, roads, even when, because what I was doing up there was actually finding out where water wells can be put. And a lot of the villages were actually against it, because water wells changed their community life. Because the women gathered water, but sometimes they'd walk 20 kilometers every day to go and get water. I mean, they'd be great on the Fish River hike, wouldn't they? They could just carry the water for us. Maybe we should hire some Himbas for the hike. And it was actually American Aid that I was working for at that point. They proposed that they would go to the Kokaveld and put in water wells in the middle of the village, so women didn't have to walk. And the women said no. Because when they walked from the village to the water and back again, that's when they did all the village business. That's when they talked to each other, they sorted out issues, who was sleeping with who was going to marry who could do what. Because the women in the Himbas make most of the decisions, because they run the village, the men go out and herd the goats. So what they did, and they thought that if they were in the village, the men would interfere with the running of the village if they were there trying to sort things out. So the compromise was those water troughs, which are put outside the village, and they can choose to use them or not, and other people can use them. So they do get along, but they govern themselves very strictly. So anybody messing with anybody, it really is back to, like if you and I have a disagreement, we wouldn't sit down and chat over a cup of coffee. It's okay, go and get your panga. Let's see who bleeds first, let's see who falls down first, and that's how they sort things out, which means they have very, very little issues. Also, they're a very communal tribe. The families share everything. So one member of a family has something, the whole tribe has it. And generally it can be something as simple as, you know, a number plate that fell off a car. They will take it to the village elder. The village elder will decide what is the best use of this thing for the community, rather than people having stuff. They're not interested in possessions. They're interested in living as a community and surviving. And this is something we've got very soft, because we don't need to survive anymore. We start living a life. They are surviving. Average age of a Himba, you're old once you're in your 20s. So all of you, not just me, are old. Actually, do I say, is anybody under 20?
I'm not 20.
Oh, so, okay, we've got some youngsters in the audience. A youngster. Sorry if I've aged anybody else. And, I mean, when I was going there, when I was 26, they used to refer to me as the old man. And it hasn't really changed very much. Their life expectancy, when they get to 40, they're a revered father. You know, that is really old for him, but life is very, very hard there. I'm not sure what to call me now, but we'll leave that to but yeah, this is just typical supermarket. It's just like a normal supermarket, and this is how they live. So this is actually the Herero village. So the Hereros are not nomadic like the Himbas. So the Himbas will generally have the mud huts and the kraals and do the goat herding. The Hereros generally have more permanent houses and homes like this, and they do more sort of management style. So it's like a tiered structure, and it works for them. But you can see just typically that's how they go out to dress. You imagine dressing like that every night, every day. It's just yellow just doesn't suit me. Actually, no, somebody said it did. Yeah, see, yellow does suit me, so maybe I should. Anyway, this is the main road between Apuvu and Ruakana. So it is a tar road. It's in patchy conditions. It's not potholed, but that is the road. And we've skipped all the way to Ruakana now. Ruakana has been a bit of a source of controversy. It's very, very beautiful. This is the Kunene River. This is the lower hills in Angola. And then it goes to the higher mountains where the Kunene River starts. So it flows all the way down here. Then it comes through the hills here, and this is actually on the border. So this is Angola this side, this is Namibia this side. And this is the falls that come down here. In the 80s, the Namibian government, with South African approval and Angola approval, put a hydroelectric power plant in here. So a water power plant. So the water level, it goes up and down a lot through the year, depending on how they need electricity. And for years, it put Namibia in advance because they were the first country in southern Africa to have hydroelectric power. And as far as I know, in Zimbabwe have done it at Kariba. I don't think there's any hydroelectric in South Africa even yet. We could do with that, couldn't we? Anyway, so this is Ruacana Falls. So if you're going by car, normal car, and you want an easy trip, you can go to Apuvu, you can visit the Himbas and Herero in their very local environment, then you can drive through to here and enjoy the Ruacana Falls. And they're actually a bit better than Popper Falls. And this is actually in low season. Often this whole thing is a cascade of water, but of course upstream they've got the dam which controls the water going on and off. Also, the views we're looking at are from the Angola side, or actually not in Namibia side, because the border is really weird. There is a border for crossing here, but not for tourists. It really is just for the locals. But if the best views of the falls, if you haven't got a drone, are actually from the Angolan side or in the no man's land. So you don't have to cross the border. You can actually go to the Namibian border post and say to the people, is it okay to go and look at the falls? And they'll say yes. And you can drive through, and as long as you don't go to the Angola control point, because then you'll have issues, you can then go to that bit in the middle and view the falls. So that's the best way to view the falls at Ruacana. If you then, some people then say, oh, I want a picture of me in front of the Angolan border post. Don't do it. So, I've tried that, wasn't a bad idea. I actually took Flash, the Ford that I've got, up here. And that's why I got stuck between Angola and Namibia. I had to actually ask the Angolan guard to push me up the Sanders. Not a popular idea. But yes, so it's beautiful up there, and there is a lot of water. This is actually the channel that comes from the hydroelectric plant and then goes across. And you can see this is the Angolan hills in the background there. So now the real journey begins. So we've done the easy part. We've come up to Apuvu, nice tar road. We've taken this tar road up here. This is the tar road now. So we're actually on this road, because you drive into Apuvu on the tar road, then you can drive out on the tar road. All the other roads out of Apuvu are 4x4 only. So you have to drive back to this road, back up to Ruacana, we're at the falls. Now we're going to go along the border of Angola, along the river's edge, and we're heading to Apupa Falls, the other falls along here. And the road starts to get a little gravelly. It's not difficult 4x4 driving, but definitely needs high ground clearance. Beautiful scenery along the way. You basically dodge in and out beside the river, making sure you don't wander into Angola. And this actually, I think, is Kunene River Lodge, or Omarunga Lodge. I can't remember which one this is. So then you get to, oh yes, this is Apupa Omarunga Lodge, which is right here. So we've taken the journey along here. Now, we were talking about this the other day, about driving distances. A lot of the guidebooks will give you this driving distance, and it is only 278 kilometers. And they'll give you a time of 3 hours. Realistically, it takes 7 to 8 hours. Because it's a gravel road, there is some dips in the road, and of course you want to stop and take photographs and have a picnic on the way as well. When you get there, it's really beautiful, and that's all, and that's Angola over the other side there. So this is the Kunene River. The river is full of crocs and hippos, so you can't swim in it, and quite regularly at this campsite, the crocs will be just wandering along here. So you do have to be careful. The good news is the crocs sleep at night, so you're okay when you go out at night. Just got to watch out for the hippos.
And they don't bother the campers?
Not that we know of. We've only lost 1 or 2 groups. But if it takes the whole group, nobody knows about it. No, in general, there is usually warnings up that, you know, beware of the crocodiles. And generally people who are going this route do have to be a lot more savvy, or they're not going to make it out, to be honest. And you soon realise, even the drive from Ruacana to Apupa, that you are in a wildless area. I mean, there's nobody lives on that border stretch, which is a bit unusual. And there's no fences, there's animals everywhere. So people get quite clued up. But as far as I know, having said that, all along this area, the biggest fatality amongst locals is crocodiles and hippos. Because they still live on and in the river. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we can see a crocodile walking along here. You would like stay away. They'd be in the river there washing their clothes. And you think, well, okay. But it is a beautiful setting. Yes, this is Kunene River Lodge. So actually we haven't got to a pupa yet. This is actually along here. So for a day's drive, we've gone from here to here in one day as a sensible drive to arrive in the afternoon. And there is actually a river lodge right on the lodge there. And most of their customers come from Angola because they can just come across the river. A lot of this area is actually easy to access points from the Angolan side. But it's a nice lodge, especially considering it's in the middle of nowhere. Now we've zipped to a pupa. Again, it's a gravel road, average Namibian gravel road, and this is along the Kunene. So you can drive along there, you can camp, have breakfast by the river. There is a monument, the Dorsland Trekkers Monument, because I don't know, you probably all know about the Voortrekkers who travelled all across southern Africa. A lot of them went up to Namibia. Most of them didn't make it very far. The story of Sestrum Canyon and crossing the Sestrum Desert. But there was, the Dorsland Trekkers were the most adventurous. They made it all the way into Angola. So they trekked all the way through Namibia, survived that. I don't know how many of them died on the road. Then they got up here. There's this monument is where they crossed, and this is where they went into Angola. Then they went into Angola, decided, no, this isn't for us, turned round and came all the way back and resettled in South Africa. Absolutely amazing story. I don't know the actual numbers, but a lot of them stopped and did settlements and had families on the way. So a lot of the people on the western coast, the Nama, the Dama, and even the Himbas and Hereros, they come from some of the Dorsland trekkers. Because a lot of people stopped off, one person stopped here, family stopped here, and they developed on the way. So it's, there's a monument, and it's really bizarre. This monument, there's nothing around. And that's Angola over that side. Literally, that is the border with Angola. And that's where they crossed. And there's this monument.
Is there rocks the border?
Yes. Just that literally, you step over there, you're technically in Angola. And yeah, I mean, there's so few people living there. And the Himbas, who live in that area, and the Hereros, there's 1/3 of the tribe is actually in Namibia, 2/3 is in Angola. So that's why they don't have the same national identity as a lot of Namibians, because their actually territory is this area here, which is mostly Angolan. So they would consider themselves more Angolan than Namibian, but they only consider themselves Himba or Herero in that area. That's because the federal government doesn't mess with them, lets them get on with it. And yes, like when you're driving along, kids, they just appear from absolutely nowhere. But you follow the river along, get some beautiful views. Again, a river crossing, I know it's sand. Sometimes there's water in it. And this is where it's from this point onwards, because you could probably get to the Kunene River Lodge in a good high ground clearance vehicle. But from here on, for large portions of the year, okay, 6 to 8 weeks, which is big for Namibia, this will have water in it, it'll be a water crossing. And this is some people just living here. But then you'll drive 2-3 hours and this will be your typical scenery. Now, I don't know if you notice, absolutely no road signs, no road markings, no road lights, no petrol stops, nothing at this point. And this is the best part of the road. But the scenery is absolutely breathtaking. And there's a little village. Does anybody know what this is? It's a chicken coop. For putting the chickens in. So when they go out to herd the goats for the day and go to gather the water, they put all the chickens in there to keep them safe because they're right by the river from the animals. So this is actually a village which in the evening will probably be occupied and people sleeping there with all full of goats and coming in there. They take them out in the morning. And then yes, a typical village. So when you look at a map on here, it'll show a pupa as a town. just up here. And it's got a little symbol for an airfield, and it has fuel and shops. That is Apupa. That is the entire town of Apupa. So there is nothing there. I'm not sure where the airfield is. You might be just have to land here. And that's there's the falls is just there. Those hills are actually in Angola on the other side, and that is the entire town of Apupa. But there is quite a few places to stay in Apupa, but there's a couple of lodges and a couple of campsites. This is Omarunga. And you see quite nice campsites, nice shady campsites, right by, and the falls are just over the edge there, on the Angolan side. So it's beautifully set up, but still very local. This is the wall to the campsite. So you're camping this side, this is the other side, this is where the locals are doing their washing, their goats coming through, but they don't bother anybody. If you want to take pictures, you ask. Some of them ask for money, some of them will just smile at you. And this is Apupa Falls. Again, varies year to year. What you can't see here from this angle is there's actually a big drop down here. And this is actually in the dry, here we go. That's the bigger drop at Apupa Falls. So it is a good waterfall. This whole area in the wet season can get completely covered with water. And you've got the baobabs, and then it goes downstream. The problem is getting there in the wet season is a lot more difficult than in the dry season. So when it's rained, a lot of those roads are cut with rivers running across them. And as we'll see later, a lot of water is underneath this area. So when there's rains further north, not necessarily rains here, as usual in Namibia, there's Angola over the other side, the water comes up from underneath. So it looks great, you drive on it and you and this is the view from Omarunga, and there's the falls right there. So it's quite beautiful. And that's the town. There's the Kunene River, and then it falls down into this like crevasse, so it's quite an odd. The road from here. We are now at Apupa Falls. Here's Apupa Falls. From here onwards, there is now no road from this point connecting to the coast. There is no access at all to the coast from here. To give an idea, Terrace Bay, which we covered on Skeleton Coast, is still way down here. When you come up the coast route, this is the furthest you can travel north on the coast. All of this area is the Skeleton Coast National Park and is mostly uninhabited because all the water in this area is completely undrinkable because it's contaminated, and there's marginal life in this area because we'll see later when we're driving through some of these routes through here, the sea mist in the mornings can spread nearly 200 kilometers inland, which is absolutely phenomenal. So it does give some life on the surface, but not enough to sustain human life or even a lot of animals. And this is now our standard road as we go through. And this is the road you're going to have for about the next 300 kilometers. And this is the best section of this bit of the road.
So not tar then?
So definitely not tar or toll road. And you get these areas like this where it's just basically carved through these areas.
So you can definitely not be an amateur with 4x4?
No. I would never recommend going by yourself or an inability. Still, we get lots of tourists who will rent a vehicle by themselves and go up there. But you have to be very lucky. I mean, and the wear and tear on the car, and usually it's best to have someone guiding you through because in these big cars and narrow things you can't see. So you've got one or two of these bumpy areas which are rocky on the way, but not that dangerous. You might break your vehicle, but later when we get to Van Zyl's Pass, which is one of the most dangerous passes in the world to drive down, because you can only drive down it.
And I just know how much to stay in the vehicle.
No, usually through most of the vehicles, if you're the guide, you either turf the people out to make the vehicle lighter, depending on what load you've got on. But a lot of them will come to the passes. That one's not so bad because that one is like, you feel safe, because although it's rocky, you've got no cliffs either side and you're going through a little valley and it feels safe. But even then, once the vehicle starts jumping around, especially people who are not used to doing 4x4 driving, most people like to get out the car and watch it, rather than be in the car rocked around. Later when it comes to the pass, nobody stays in the car. So once you're coming down this route, so it's actually this route that's marked in bold, oh no it's not, yes, we're actually on this bold green route here, coming up to, there's another airfield here. There is no campsites in this gap. And from the south here, from this turning that we're going to take the next day, that we come in here through Marienfluss and over the pass, is actually technically part of the national park. So there's no wild camping allowed. Because a lot of people say, oh, it's a beautiful area, go and camp wherever I like. You sort of can, because you can drive the entire day and you will not see a single person. And there's nobody living out there. So you can selectively wild camp, but if you're a responsible operator, you actually camp just north of Van Zyls Pass before you come into the national park. But then from this point on, even if you're at a campsite, it's wild camping. If you don't have anything, you're not going to get it. And Amazon don't deliver there yet. So again, you sit at the camp, but anything can happen in the bush. People can rock up. You'll get the Himbas if they're living in the area. They dot around the area. This is a Himba kraal. They might walk into the camp and just say hello. But you can get elephants, rhino, giraffe. Anything can wander through the camp. There's no limitations. And the worst thing is herds of goats. They won't eat you, but they'll eat everything else that's not pinned down, including your socks, your shoes, your bags. Goats eat anything. And as you're driving around, yeah. And now you see this Himba kraal looks a bit odd, because you've got the one for the cattle, and you've got one hut that stays there, that's the chief's hut, or the old person's hut, but the rest of the kraal is gone. And that's because Himbas are nomadic, so it means there's no water in this area at the moment, so they will break down the outer wall and put all the wood for it inside here or here. Sometimes if there's an old person that's unfit to travel, that person will get to live there until the tribe comes back. And then they will just move everything to the next location where there's water, where they'll have another kraal like this, and then they'll build up the wall again, live there for a few weeks or months until the water and the grass in the areas run out, and then move around to the next area and circle round. So this is why you've got the cattle kraal and a hut, but not a wall around it. This is part of the wall. I think this is the entrance here. It is a truly remarkable way of living. And you can see the landscape. Again, there's a lot of water underneath, but rain, nothing. Just north of Van Zyls Pass, there is a campsite, and it's literally a lay-by beside the road. And that's it. There's nobody there, there's nothing there. You can't pre-book it. It's a community campsite. Sometimes the community people come along and take some money for it, but otherwise, again, it's almost like wild camping. So we're now heading down this area here, which actually isn't even marked on the map, going over Van Zyls Pass. Now, Van Zyl was a Dutch explorer who was the commissioner of this area in 1920. And he, with 200 Himbas, drove up from Puros, which is further south here, tried to make a route up through to the north, because it was his area. So basically, and he drove in 1904 a Model T Ford. So one of the earliest cars that was ever made. And basically had about 200 or 300 Himbas who would clear the road for him to drive up. So we'll hear a lot about Van Zyl on this journey southwards, because he did it from south to north. When he got here, this is where he got stuck. So he got Van Zyls Pass is the blocking route. He could go no further north, even with the clearing of the road. And this is the big sticky point of this whole route, is you can only go down the pass. You can't come up the pass. So they call Van Zyls Pass after Van Zyl, and it's a 15-kilometer stretch that tucks in between the mountains.
Is that the road out there?
No, we're on the road here. The thing that makes Van Zyls Pass so dangerous is that you've got a cliff like this, and the road is carved along the cliff. This road was constructed in 1965 by a group of 20 men and a group of Himbas who basically carved out this route on the side of the cliff. You can see it's got a slope here, then it goes down, then it slopes down here in 1965, and it's the only access route through. So not only is it rocky, because the problem is it's not just rocky on the edge of the cliff. The road is not level like this. The road tips like this. And you've got a big drop down here. So if you're bumping a vehicle, everybody driven in a four-wheel drive on an off-road? You know how it just sort of goes, yeah, you've got that bumpy feeling. Now you imagine at this angle and you're going, ha, ha, ha. And you look out the window and all you can see is a drop. So every time you go over the pass, you have to literally go up and patch up the road, work out where your wheels are going to go and work out your route down. And then, and of course, once you start, you cannot stop because it's loose shale. You can see how even in four-wheel diff lock, the wheels are locking up and skidding. If you brake too much, you'll just skid off. And not every year, but every 2 or 3 years, they have to go and clear the vehicles that have rolled off the side. Now, the last time there was actually a fatality was 7 years ago when somebody rolled off and got killed. But mostly it's just the vehicle gets wrecked. And you see, as you're driving down, that is a drop down on that side. And you don't have any width because they've carved the narrowest route possible, and you've got big rocks sticking up that you have to make sure, because normally you'd put your tires on the rocks to get good grip. But if you do that, on one side, you're going to start tipping like this. So you have to pick your way carefully, and your vehicle has to have good ground clearance. Then there's a few up bits, but basically this is 15 kilometers of this. Now we've done the easy stretch at this point, and then you climb up, and of course it looks better here because if you roll off, it doesn't look like you're going to go far. Not going to hurt your vehicle then. And of course you then twist the tire. In the rainy season, it's completely inaccessible because when it's wet, you cannot drive along there. And then you'll be going along, and then there's a Himba woman just wandering around. She's off to gather water. So she's got her jerry can there, and her little bucket, and here's a trailer that got abandoned. Just broke. So it just got abandoned there. And then this is Van Zaal's viewpoint.
Well, what did they do with the things that was in the trailer? Because obviously the car is packed already.
Yeah, they either abandoned it there or tried to pack it on the thing additionally, or hopefully they're with another vehicle and can distribute the things. Yeah, anything that's left, yeah, the locals will come along and make use of it, so they love it. Once you get to the top, seeing the lady with the water can reminds me of when I first went up there. We used to go up there with Land Rovers and tourists, and in those days we had the petrol cans and the water cans on the roof because we had the tourists inside. And we had a row of, one Land Rover would have 5 water cans on it. And whenever we got to these areas, the Himbas would come around, and obviously we had an arrangement with one of the village elders where our tourists could safely go and interact with the villagers and look around and take pictures. And we would always bring presents for the chief, for the village. And he would always think that he wanted tin for this or bits of copper. But one day, Ian and I were sitting down with the village chief, and he went, because he didn't speak any English, and so he was translating through like what seemed like a 6-year-old child. So doing the greeting, and again, greetings up here are very important. It takes about 10 minutes to greet somebody. Now, Perry, now, shake hand, hug, shake hand, dance around. Anyway, then we sat down, we're having the meeting, and said, okay, we gave him what we brought this time. And Ian was then saying, so is there anything we can bring next month? Because we would go there once a month, we'd do a trip through there. And he would say, yes, I want one of your magic cans. And of course, we're translating through a 6-year-old child. So we're sort of like, a magic can? What does he mean, a magic can? So the conversation went backwards and forwards, and we're sitting around the fire, we're drinking local brew, so, things aren't particularly clear anyway. And we're sort of like, we went to bed, we still had no idea what a magic can was. So in the morning, we get the tribal chief back and say, okay, can you show us a magic can? And they went to the Land Rover and pointed to the water cans on the roof. Because, of course, we always had them filled up, and when we wanted water, we opened it, and water came out. So they considered that a magic can. If they had one of them, they would always have water. So we had to try and explain that when it's empty, you still had to refill it. He was very disappointed. Anyway, it just reminded me seeing the woman carrying her water can around. And it's interesting, the Himbas, unlike a lot of African women, don't carry things on their head. Like that water canister, she wouldn't put it in her head and carry. She'll carry like this. Now those cans are sometimes 25 kilos, and she'll walk 20 kilometers carrying it. It's absolutely phenomenal. Once you get to the top of Van Zyl's Pass, you've got this beautiful view into what's called the Marienfluss. Now, Marienfluss means Mary's River, and this was Van Zyl's wife was called Mary, and the Kunene River, this is actually a floodplain from the Kunene River. So when there was lots and lots of water in Angola, and there was no villages and towns obstructing it, this entire area would flood and be so there's a big flat desert area, almost 200 kilometers long, which is the riverbed, and you get these beautiful views over the Marienfluss. And this is the road that we're going to be taking down into there. First of all, we have to get down there. But you can see a lot of traits, because technically it's an extension of the Namib Desert from further south. So it's a beautiful area, and you can actually camp at the viewpoint at the top there for the night. Then we're now going down the other side of the pass. Now, you don't have the sheer drop either side, but again, the road just needs patching up all the time, and you just walk your way down, and then, yes. This is the cars that didn't make it, that either skidded off, rolled off, broke down, because you do have, again, you go to the side, there's nothing going to stop you down, you just roll over and down you go. Which is why, A, you kick your passengers out of the car, because obviously you don't want to have that extra risk and weight. But also, most passengers, when you get to the top, and I'll show you a better view later, when they say, do you want to stay in the car? Well, oh no, we'll stay in the car. You get to the top, no, I'm water walk, because they see what you're going to go down. But you can see this over here is in the drop, and this is what happens. Most vehicles get to the corner, brake, and then roll over. So once you're committed, you've got to have a certain element of confidence. You can see how steep it is. Gives you a better view. So you just basically roll your way down. Once you start rolling, you just keep rolling until you get to the bottom. Most of the vehicles are down here, down in this dip, down this side. Which is why you shore up the side of the road, because this is a concrete thing that tips you this way. So you can see how you've got the angle on there. And if your truck has got lots of stuff on the roof and is slightly unbalanced, all vehicles have a tipping point. And 4x4s, of course, by nature being a bit high, can obviously tip over easier.
Top heavy.
Yeah. Especially if you've got lots of tourists and fuel and water in the top, because you have to carry all your own fuel from basically Puvu all the way around this loop, which is about a 600 kilometer range, but driving a lot of it in four-wheel drive, which of course chows fuel much more. Yes, so now we're on the very steep part. So you can see, you go down there, you go around the corner there, and we're trying to get down there. And then you're out. And then we're basically going to make our way through these hills, down a few dips, up a few dips, through these mountains, and then we're going to come round and out this side here into Marienfluss. So 15 kilometers of Van Zyl's Pass, but then you've still got a lot of four-wheel driving. So it really is an area really for the prepared and the adventurous. An average tourist would not go there. Should not go there. Having said that, a few of them do. Really, most of the groups that do go through here, this gives you a better idea of the angle. So normally you would only drive if you have a spotter. So basically you have someone who stands and guides and tells you where to put the wheel, and you've got to trust them, because you can't see like this. See, we're going down the pass, and he's basically waving them on, showing them which route to take the vehicle. This is my new car. I'm saving up for. That's my old car, which needs replacing now. I once did that trip, and because I did this trip every month for a few years, and normally you'd get in the old 110 Land Rover, which was always top heavy as well. So normally you'd get to the top and all the passengers would get out. because they want to take a picture, and also they're like, oh, crap, I'm not doing that. Exactly like you said. One day, one lady decided to stay in the front seat with me. We got to that stage, and she just started screaming. She didn't stop for 10 minutes until we got to the bottom. I was like trying to concentrate and drive and look at my spotter, and she was, ah, the entire time. I never let anybody stay in the car again, even if they asked to. And it plays havoc on your tyres. And then this is, you come over this and you can see the beautiful views. This is about a month after the rains in this one, so it's really, really beautiful and green. And you can see they're all coming down there. This is completely off the ground. And these are actually, the scree is sometimes the worst bit, because if you slide sideways, there's nothing you can do apart from accelerate, which when you're skidding is just counterintuitive. But it then gives you grip. This tree at the end, people write their name on it, the date they survived, and put it here. So this is about 20 years of people who have gone over the pass.
So you've got a few rocks there.
I've got a few rocks. I think I've got my own personal pile underneath the tree there. But yeah, so it's not, and basically just go to the river runs through there. And as you can see, at this point you get out, you put the table out, and you open a drink. Everybody, and then you put a stone on here. So you can see, even after 20 or so years, there's not a lot of people come through here.
Would you say that car companies take the 4x4s to show them how the cars?
Yeah, in fact, some of the footage you were seeing was actually the launch of the new Land Rover. When they launched that in 2020, they actually shipped them out to this area to show their off-road capabilities. But this area, you have to be very confident in your car to invite a dozen world journalists, stick them in a car and put them down there. You'll see some footage later where they weren't so successful all the time. So we're now into Marienfluss. And this is just an amazing area. This is in the evening light. So Marienfluss is the floodplain. Oh, sorry, Vossi.
How many days does it take to do?
Yeah, and how if you get lost or not. From Ipupa to Puros, realistically, 4 days of driving. The Van Zyls Pass section, which is 15 kilometers, is a day to do that section. Because you can camp just north of the pass, but then you've got to go to the pass in the morning, navigate your way through the 15 kilometers of the actual pass, which is complete low-range four-wheel driving. So it's not like it is, you're crawling the entire time.
10 kilometers per hour, basically.
Well, actually, the recommended speed for going down Van Zyls Pass is 2 kilometers an hour. And over 15 kilometers is obviously a lot of time. But then after Van Zyls Pass, when you get past the sheer drops, you've still got four-wheel driving to do, so it takes a lot longer to the next section. So Van Zyls Pass itself is a day, and then you come into Marienfluss, which is still a combination of sand, rocks, and rivers, which takes 2 days, and you've got the first day going. So I'd say 4 days is a minimum for going through, and you have to carry all your supplies. Everything you need for every night you have to take in there. It's one of those places, once you get there, you want to spend longer, especially once you come over Van Zyls Pass. You've got that behind you. You come into Marienfluss. It is an amazing floodplain with a mountain in the middle of it. So it is just breathtakingly vast. And you've got Marienfluss, which is the sandy side. As you can see, the mountains sticking up. And that is the sun setting over Skeleton Coast. So this then sweeps all the way down like this to Skeleton Coast. So you've got these tail end of the mountain that comes in from the Angolan highlands, and then this is just basically sand dune all the way to the coast, which is approximately from here about 250 kilometers. And the morning sea mist comes in and covers this every morning. Well, not every, but most mornings. It is stunningly vast. Oh, that's the campsite, by the way. That's where we're camping. It's not a campsite, it's just, I think there's a better shot of there we go. So we picked a rock to hide behind. They hide behind the rock so you can hide so nobody can see you, because obviously you don't want the passing traffic to disturb us. So basically here, yeah, there is like official campsites, but it's wild camping. And then you, coming down to Marienfluss, you've got the rocky road, then comes to this sort of track, and then you're onto the actual Marienfluss itself is sandy. So you've gone from gravel roads to rocky terrain, and then you come to sand. So it really does test your four-wheel drive ability. If you're not competent, and that's the hills, the mountain range in the background. So Marienfluss surrounds this mountain range. So you've got as much this side as on the other side. It's just unbelievably fun. No? It should be, shouldn't it? And the heat here, the other thing is heat and shelter gets intense. So this is driving through the Marienfluss. This is the main road through Marienfluss. It gives you some sort of idea as to what driving is like. Have you ever driven in sand on a 4x4? I always say it's like dancing, because you can't control, it's like the back end of the vehicle, especially on the big vehicles, is dancing, so you're just dancing with it. But you can't go slowly in sand or you get stuck. Now the other problem is, underneath this whole area is the Kunene River, which is, we'll see later, what causes a lot of problems, and why you can't go here in the rainy season. And of course, yeah, it never rains here. This is actually proper desert. It never rains here at all. It gets the mist and that's it. But it rains in Angola. The water floods down here a couple of weeks later underneath. And you can see it's your constant driving. It's not just a casual drive. You are correcting all the time and just keeping the front end in front of the back, because that's what happens in sand. The back end tries to overtake you and you roll. So you've always got to keep the front end going faster than the back. I know it sounds logical, but it's surprising. And the reason for going there is just, I mean, look at it. It is these are the new Land Rovers. This was when they went there.
Yeah, so that was a journalist driving, not a 4x4 specialist.
Yes, yeah. But the scope is just amazing. I mean, it really is. You've got, after Marienfluss, which is the water, you then go over a mountain pass, and you then come into a second desert area, which is called Hartmann Valley, after the early explorer that named the Hartmann zebra as well, which is found in this area. Another very strange anomaly in this area is the lost men of the Kaokoland, they're called. Now, they started appearing about 20 years ago, and nobody knows who put them there, when, and why. And nobody, you're not supposed to share the location of these anyway, so you can't find the location of these. They estimate there's between 50 and 100 of them scattered amongst the Kaokoland. We saw how remote, somebody went there and did this deliberately. And they're all in a different unique pose, and the idea is to make you think, use your imagination as to what was the artist trying to say here? What does that mean to you? This is a guy sitting under the only tree in 50 kilometers range. And there's all different poses. You've got there's one right at the beginning of the Kaokoland, if you're coming from the south, which is a welcoming handshake. Sort of welcome. And then you've got people lying down, all different ones. And nobody will share the location of any of them. It's meant to be you go there, you look for them. If you find them, you find them. If you don't, you don't. So that's it. So these are the lost men of the Kaokoland, and still to this day nobody knows who put them there and why, and new ones keep appearing randomly. So it's really nice to be and some of them are really obvious, like this one sitting under a tree. He's just sitting there. Now, did his car break down? Is he waiting for a lift? I don't know what these guys are doing. Lost his hat though. So that's the lost men of the Kaokoland, which is really quite a fascinating. Someday somebody will discover who did it. Could be Banksy, I don't know. No, I don't think he'll come to Namibia. But they're dotted all over. We'll see a few of them as you go along.
That one took a trailer.
Yes, they actually went over the pass in a trailer, an off-road four-wheel drive trailer. As you head down Marienfluss, you can see the sand gets that more red, just like the Namib Desert, going further down. And you can see a lot of the tracks on here are just animal tracks. So the way to navigate through this area is to look where the animals walk, because the animals will walk on the firmest ground. And you can see you've got all the tracks concentrated in this area here, and then just clean sand. Now, of course, if you don't know any better, you think, I'm in a four-wheel drive, I'll go in for a joll and I'll just drive round and do some things. You drive off there, the chances are you'll get stuck, because it'll be soft sand or water underneath it. So you always follow the animal tracks, but, with the occasional tree. When it rains in this area, it turns green for about 2 weeks, and just a little tiny little grass comes up, and it's absolutely stunningly beautiful, but getting there that time of year is almost impossible. So this section here that we're driving here along here, there's an ostrich, will take you about 4 to 6 hours just to cover that area, and that's staying close to the mountains. So you can pick up some lunch, nice drumsticks. Then you come to one of the only settlements in the area, and this is a town whose name I can't pronounce, and there is actually a camp here, Camp Sinkra, and you can see there's water here. So this is water that's now popped up in the surface. This is still the Kunene River that we saw at Tapupa. It's gone under the Marienfluss, and now it pops up to the surface here for most of the year. And this is where the area where Kaokoland originally got its name from, Doubtful Water, because this farmer lived in this area, and this water just magically appeared all the time, and he was sure it was going to run out at some point. So that's how it was originally named, after this area. And the water here is sort of drinkable. But you'll see, yeah. And then you do have some more, less dramatic, but there's still a few cuts you have to go through, the mountain passes and up and down. Fortunately, there's not sheer drops either, but very rough on the vehicle. And you've got this section where you go up the hill to come out of Marienfluss and then over into Hartmann's Valley on the other side. You see, you get your spotter, guide you through, and you will ding your vehicle. Because you're rocking either side by side, you'll hit the bottom of it, you'll hit the rocks on the side. There's the Hartmann. So we've just driven right down the Marienfluss there, and now we're coming over onto the Hartmann Valley. And this is a massive area where you've got undersea lava rock that is in ridges like this, just popping up through the desert floor. So all of these is just rocky like slates like this. So there's very few access points through it because these rocks don't wear, and there's very few routes. You basically, the only route through is to follow the river as you go through, which is fine in the dry season, but in the wet season, it's just impassable. I'm going to grab some coffee while we look at the valley. Yes, that's it there. You can Then the road gets a bit better. It's not so rocky, but it's gravelly. Unfortunately, it can get corrugated because they don't do road repairs up here very often. But then you'll just wander along, you'll find, yeah, the white quartz, Himba people living, random people appear from nowhere. And people do somehow manage to survive in this area. But there is nothing in this area. There's no electricity. At night, it is absolutely amazingly dark. It is really beautiful. Then we come, we're back to Van Zyl. Van Zyl, when he started his exploration coming up from Puros, he had a Model T Ford, which had a very small tank. So what he did, he set out the route by putting drums of fuel. So there's the red drum. I don't know if I put them all together. Red drum, blue drum, green drum. I think there's an orange drum. 4 drums. Where he literally took a drum of fuel, drove to the fuel range of his car for a return trip, dropped off the fuel, and then drove back. Then refueled, then drove to the drum, topped up, drove to the next spot, put the next drum down, went back again. So he could actually make his way through. And those drums, the original drums have all been stolen, unfortunately, because up until, and this is the blue drum, which has a telephone with satellite link there, so you can phone home. It doesn't work. the blue drum and the orange drum. So so unfortunately, they lasted there until about 2002 when somebody stole all the original drums. But up until then, he'd put them there in 1904. And they stayed there for nearly 100 years. Unfortunately, then got stolen, sold, you know. So they've actually replaced them with replicas of the drum. So they're not the original drums anymore, unfortunately. But it does think of like 100 years ago, some guy was trying to go through this area, and probably the green drum, the whole area hasn't changed. So we then out of, one of the other stone men. Now we're near Orapembi, which is, we're coming down, where's Puros? Here's Puros here. So basically we've crossed this section here. So where Van Zyl's Pass is right in the middle there, then coming on to Marienfluss, and then we're dropping down towards Puros. And now we're coming to some of the river sections. So we're getting further and further away from the river, but you get more water in this area and river than you do in all the rest of the journey, because there's less sand and there's more rock underneath. And yes, it's dusty. Everything will get coated in dust, especially the cameraman. This is early in the morning. This is the coastal mist that you get early in the morning. So it comes all this way inland, and this is, you know, when you set off in the morning, early morning, this is what you see. It burns off quite quickly. As soon as it gets about 1 hour after sunrise, it'll then burn off. So this is now entering the Skeleton Coast National Park. So we're past Van Zyl's Pass, we're heading down towards Puros here, and we're just in the section here. So that is then the Skeleton Coast National Park as you come up from Torra Bay. So to go in there, it says no entry. Of course, there's nobody around to stop you. But you are supposed to get your permit at one of the Skeleton Park National Gates, either Springbokvasser or Ugab Gate, before going in there. But of course, you've driven around here, you've driven nowhere near here. So you can get them in Windhoek beforehand. You're supposed to get your permit for when you're driving in the park. But there's nobody there. But you should get your permit. Because then the road then cuts in, and yeah, it's that this is where the road actually gets quite bumpy. But pretty much it's like that all the way to the coast. Now you can just see the hint of the coastal fog. That's over the sea now when it's rolled back during the day. So you're looking about 200 kilometers. And there it's just absolutely flat all the way to, well actually this is north of Terrace Bay. But again, it's just the absolute emptiness and vastness of the area that is breathtaking. Always remember to put your handbrake on. Then you've got these really odd areas. They're called the castles. And this is from historically where the water, the river, used to fill up to here. Because all of this is river erosion. Nowadays, the water just barely touches the surface. But they reckon 10,000, I don't know how many years ago, that this used to be a river that would rival the Amazon in South America. It was a fully fledged big river. And all of these are carved out from the historic river in the Horosub riverbed. They do look a bit like castles, and you can see lots of birds and bats and animals live in the crevasses. So you can see all the moisture coming down here. That's bat pee. Don't lick it. It's quite an amazing, and you can see how the ground looks slightly damp because the water is quite close to the surface here. Because at some point, this is some oryx going on. You have to get through the mountains to get to the other side to Puros. The only way through, because you've got Hartman's Valley on one side, the mountains on the other, gets narrower and narrower until you can literally only follow the river as it goes through. And even in the dry season, you will have that. So now you've had rocky, you've had gravel, you've had sand, you've had rocks, and now you have water crossing. So you really are going to, and that is the only way through. This is the only gap going from Van Zyl south through to Puros. There is other, and you can't go backwards at this point. But, once you get through, you get to Puros. This is the big city of Puros. I think that's the whole city. But they are big football fans. So this vehicle, this here, is the Manchester United trading post for all football fans. But, there is no supplies. There is a sort of basic shop, but the shop here serves locals. So it's got maize meal, oil, sugar, those sort of things. You can get fuel here if you organise. In fact, is that it? I think that's the fuel station there. So it's not an official fuel station. You can't just rock up and get fuel. You have to phone a week before you arrive and tell the lodge at Puros, which is Okaharingo Lodge, that you want fuel, how much fuel, and pay for it. Then they'll have the fuel waiting for you to pump there. And they will then supply either petrol or diesel.
And how do they get their supplies if they don't even have the cars?
Well, the lodge does have cars. So, because there's two lodges there, two actually quite upmarket lodges in this area, which are both nice places. They actually have a supply run that comes in, I think the supply run that comes in once a week or once every 2 weeks, depending on the season. In the rainy season, they sometimes can get cut off for like 2 or 3 months at a time. But there's nobody coming through, so they're just surviving there. But they do have a supply truck, because from this point southwards, because we're in, where's Puros? Here's Sesfontaine. Somebody's stolen Puros. Oh, here's Puros over here. So they actually get their supplies coming in through this route here, which you can do up to this point. So they will actually, but again, it's not like, they will actually put oil drums on the back of a bucky, strap them on the bucky, and then come through and deliver, which is why they don't supply fuel to just people coming by, because basically they calculate how much fuel they're going to need for the next season. If you want extra, you phone them, organise it, pay for it. On their next run, they will actually take that additional fuel and keep it there for you until you come through. So at a pinch, I think if you're absolutely desperate, they would sell you fuel. But,
By the cup.
but yes. And this is Puros village. But, the actual lodge itself is actually based in the mountains around here. Now, because the water is concentrated here through the mountains, this is the best place for seeing all the wildlife. So generally in this area, and all the animals in here are desert-adapted animals, so they're quite different and unique in their survival. So you'll see the giraffe, elephant, if you're lucky, rhino. There's wild desert rhino in this area. Really is fantastic if you see them. Lions, oryx, and a few others. But generally, most people do drives here to see the elephant. Yeah, that's the Puros campsite, and this is a kraal that has been set up near Puros campsite, and there was nobody there when these guys visited. But it actually gives you a good view of how a kraal is set up. This is the communal area where all the food and everything would be prepared, and the skins, and everyone would sit under the shelter. The cattle would go in the middle, and the huts around the edge for the various people to live in. Sorry.
If you go in there and the tribe comes back, are they gonna give you nonsense?
Fortunately, they're not cannibals, so you're probably okay. Depending on how you look and your age, you might get married off. She's not sure whether to look concerned or interested now. No. Generally, in this area, it's desert country. Everybody's actually very open and friendly. If you were doing something bad, like breaking their kraal down or trying to steal their stuff, yeah, then they're getting upset. The sticks, I know if you remember right at the beginning, I said there's a guy carrying a stick to fend off lions. So every man, when he gets to a certain age, gets given a goat or a cow and a stick. And the stick will have a knob at one end. So they'll take sticks off certain trees that are long and slender and strong, but they'll break off the branch so you get part of the tree with it. Then they'll smooth that round, so you've got what's called a knob stick. And the idea is, you're not going to kill anything that attacks you, but you can use that firm end to hit them in the forehead. And that will scare them off. And that's their protective thing. So they might attack you with those. And just chase you off. But in general, if we were wandering around there and they would just come back and start greeting you, you would go through the greeting ceremony, and then they would sort of like go, because English is not very well spoken here, or Afrikaans or German. It's generally over Himba or a dialect of Ovambo or Herero that they speak. So they'll then just gesture, what do you want? And then they'll point to things in your car and okay, have a sweetie. No, you should never give them sweeties. So generally they're not aggressive people. They really are gentle people. More often than not, they will set a fire and get you to sit round the fire. We used to stay in a Himba village every month, and they were always, like in a lot of parts of Africa, so Hannes has just arrived and he's at the village. The Himba men will come up and no, come. And then they won't let go of your hand for 20 minutes. And they'll be like, and you're like, can I need my hand back? But they're very social, friendly like that. Basically, it's partly from their historic. If they've got your hand, you can't draw a weapon to attack them. So that's where that traditionally comes from in African culture. Because when your hand would be your weapon hand, usually a sword or a club, if they hold it, you're showing friendship, but also you're protecting your family because you don't know who this person is. So oddly enough, they do that with strangers, but they don't do it to themselves because they trust themselves. So that's where that tradition comes from. But in general, they're very, very warm and receptive, and they're very nice people. And if you're single, they will try and marry you off. And then you can choose where you live. Do you want to live here? And this was actually in the deserted village. So these are all the handicrafts they've made. And they just leave them there. And if you did take something, you're expected just to leave the money with them there. When the Himbas first opened up to tourism, because of course, what to remember that Namibia only really opened up to tourism in the 90s, which by modern standards is very, very early, very late, when most of Africa opened up in the 60s. The Himbas, especially with their remoteness, really only got exposed to tourism in the late 90s. And unfortunately, a lot of people took advantage of them because they made beautiful handcrafts that were just made from whatever they could source locally or were handed down through families. Then tourists came along and thought, I can take this and I can go and sell it because it's like a very rare item. And Himbas didn't understand money. Paper money doesn't exist here. Nobody deals with paper money here. But coins, of course, are really valuable to them because all of these are made from metal. So anything they can beat down and make into a metal substance, which of course is more durable here. So people, unscrupulous people, used to go there with a handful of like half-cent South African coins and put it in there. I'll give you all of this if you give me all of this. And they, whoa, look at that. You know, they had no concept of the value. Money is in value, is not have any value here. So often, what we used to do, we used to take food. So we would then, the tourists would go in and select what they want, and then we would sit with a chief, and we would have bags of flour and sugar and coffee and tea and chewing tobacco. They love chewing tobacco, so you had to hide that. And then we would basically say, okay, for this, how much? And then the tourists would put what they wanted here, and the chief would come over and look at it and take what he thought was equivalent value to that. And in those days, I guess it's probably changed a bit now, you know, we would have a pile of stuff that we're going to give them anyway, because it's part of what we did. But the chief would never say, yes, I'll have it all. He would look at it and just take like one big bag of flour or something like that. So it really is quite nice. But one of the things we tried to do was teach them maths. And that was absolutely hilarious. Because the company I worked for had a thing where they would take 2 trips a year of teachers or lawyers free of charge on a trip to Namibia if they then spent 1 additional month in the country teaching people skills. And the Himbas used to love the teachers because they wanted education. One time we turned up at a village near Puros, it's actually south of Puros, and 600 children were waiting for us. We had 6 teachers. Because they had just heard, they just spread the news, and all the kids came, because there was no schools in this area those days. But I remember one lovely lady, she was an elderly school teacher, you know, the whole school mistress, she was, and she had this massive audience of children in front of her. And she basically they've been told they need to be taught maths because tourists are taking advantage of the value of things. So I'll start simple. We'll see how their basic maths levels is. So obviously they're trading goats. So they said, okay, you've got 6 goats. and you take them to Puros market, and you sell 4 goats, and then you come back. How many goats have you got when you come back? And they would, 1. No. And so she got some rocks, she put them out. Here's your 6 goats, and here's you walk to market, you sell 4, and you come back. And she brought the 2 stones back and the 4. How many do you have? They took 1 stone and went, 1. She goes, no. Well, because to go to Puros market, we have to travel over somebody else's land. So we'd have to give them a goat for traveling across their land and doing trade. So they did understand, they just didn't understand numbers as we do. So it was those sort of things. And then I made the mistake of saying, well, a few days ago we were at the sea, and they had never heard of the sea. Now, can you imagine trying to describe the sea to somebody who's never seen the sea? It was like mind-blowing for me at the time. And then, of course, well, let's all move to the sea, because their biggest problem is water. And then you have to describe the fact that, no, the sea has got salt water, and so the story gets complicated and complicated. But the women, there's actually none on display here, because they very rarely sell them. I don't know if you know those conical seashells. They're actually one of the most poisonous shells in the world. They're conical shaped. I'll try and find a picture of one. I put one on here. So traditionally, when men get to a certain age, they would trek away from the village and learn skills to survive in the wilderness. And they're originally, from years back, they would go to the coast to see the sea. And that was the edge of the world. And they would pick up these rare conical shells, or they would try and source them from the sea, because nobody living there. And they couldn't swim, of course, because they'd never seen the sea. And they would take these shells back. And the mythology, story, I don't know what to call it, is that however many of these shells you could find would be how many children you would be blessed with. So they'd always try and gather as many as possible. Because they obviously they still have big families and multiple wives and multiple husbands, but that's another story. Then they would come back, and then for the daughters, every daughter they had, they would use one of these shells to make a necklace. So they'd have this big shell with a copper and ochre necklace like this, with a big shell on it, that was called an ikipa. And that was given to every daughter when she got to, as soon as she was able to wear it, like when she was 2 years old, she was given a keeper. That was kept on her until she was given away to a man, and then the keeper was taken off, and she would keep that for her first children. So for generations and generations, these keepers, these shells were handed down, because now you cannot find those shells on the coast at all. They don't exist. And this is where a lot of stories come from, is where did these shells originally come from? Because those shells wash up only on the Indian Ocean coast. And of course, there's no way the Himbas made it all the way over there. So there's a whole lot of interesting things. And it's very rare to see in a keeper now, because most of them were bought and taken away as souvenirs, and they're not handed down through families anymore. But yes, there's various things for sale. Most of them are actually made with whatever. They do reed baskets and metalworking, and little Himba dolls that can terrify you in the night when you wake up and see them. And of course, a lot of bracelets and things. And yeah, so this is a typical village. It's just, for some reason, they've gone somewhere else with their cattle, maybe just for a short time because they haven't broken down the village. And being near Apuvo, it's probably a more semi-permanent settlement for them. And they will come backwards and forwards. And another stone man. Overlooking the... From here on, the journey gets easy-ish. Because the road it's not sandy, not deep. You see a lot of animals, but you're still following the river. So at all times of year, there will be some river crossings and some wet patches and wet mud. So you really do have to follow the trail. And desert elephants, which are really beautiful to see. It is the best area to see the desert elephants north of Palmvag. And they're very gentle elephants. They will get very inquisitive if you have water on your vehicle, but they won't attack vehicles. They're not like the Khao-Dum elephants, who are a bit more aggressive. So if you're very lucky, you'll see them. But some people go there for a week and don't see them at all. Some people drive through and they'll be standing I think like these guys were, on the road. It's just like timing. But there is a very limited number of them. I think there's there. There is under 100 of these living in Namibia, and they're the only desert elephants in the world. This is what happens if you don't know how. This is a rental car from Swakopmund, just stuck in the soft, fortunately in the soft sand for him. So thankfully these guys knew what they were doing, and just pulled up casually. And you see the tow rope you take out here is what's called an elasticated tow rope. So it's not a chain or a fixed tow rope. You can see it's like a strap like this, because it's got some elasticity in it. Because when you get bogged down in sand, especially in this area, this is dry sand, so it's not too bad. When you get bogged down in wet sand, it's really difficult to get a vehicle out. And even another vehicle towing it sometimes can't pull it out. So you see how he like twangs it like an elastic band. Because that, yes, and it also gives an extra sharp tug to get the vehicle out.
I thought I was stopping yet.
No. But then just a few meters, you can see, he was stuck down there. Just a few meters, you're in perfectly, looks perfect. He's let his tyres down. He's got a four-wheel drive. It's a rental car. But still got stuck. Just drive along normally. Probably just slow down to maybe look at the elephants and giraffe. The sand gets you. And you can see how often the riverbed fills up to here in the route through as you go down. So yes, so these are the Land Rover guys. So this is a new Land Rover going through. Because there's some parts, again, it just shows you a little bit of the different types of terrain that you drive through for this area. Some of their drivers got a bit adventurous in the river. And this is why you carry 2 spare tyres minimum and tyre plugs. Because if you're out in this area and you get a puncture, you're going to have to change your... You get 2 punctures, and at night, absolutely stunningly beautiful skies. If you get 2 punctures, you then have to rely on repairing your tyres. If you get 3 punctures, you're going to have to wait there till somebody else comes along, then go with them, get your tyre repaired, and come back. So,
Simon,
yeah.
can you see that with the naked eye?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, probably more than that. That you can see with the naked eye. Namibia is the only place I've ever been, and there's several areas, but this is probably the best area because there is no light, because Puros has no electricity, and that's the nearest town. The next town with electricity is probably 80 to 100 kilometers away. So you can stand on top of the car and you can actually look from horizon to horizon and see stars from the ground all the way over and all the way down to the other side. There would just be, and there's just so many stars, it's unbelievable. And how many, is it 8 minutes? Once every 8 minutes you can see a shooting star in the Namibian sky. Yes, so you just and that's a brilliant way to go to sleep, because we always used to sleep on the top of the Land Rover without a tent. You would just roll out your bed mat, lay up, and just watch the shooting stars in the sky. It was absolutely fantastic, and listen to the sounds. So this is typical of the sort of route through. It shows you that it's not, you've got these curves and bumps and twists. So your timing for these journeys, and you can see sand is just starting to get a little bit wet. Carry a bit of speed through it and you're okay. You slow down, you get stuck. And this is dropping down to the river. So this is the gap. They went at a slightly different time of year, so we're seeing different footage here. So this is when there was actually water in that gap that you go through. So you've got a bit of water wading and a bit of wetness to go through, and then deep sand as well. So once you start committing, you've got to keep going. You're not, unlike Van Zyls Pass, which is 1 or 2 kilometers an hour, through here, 30 to 50 is what you've got to keep going. And you've got to keep control of your vehicle while doing that and going through the river crossings. And of course, stopping to admire the locals, who are very rude. They will not push you out without a fee. You get stuck. See, even a Land Rover, being driven by semi-professionals, just the water underneath sucks it down. But he did manage to get out. So it's not an area for the faint-hearted in many, many ways, but it is, and that's that little gap through. And of course, back to the Manchester United trading area. and then we're just back on top. We've gone backwards now. This is top after you've crossed Van Zyl's Pass, looking over the Marienfluss and the Hartman Valley, just to give you an idea of the scope of the place.